Okay, to make a crochet jockstrap, you're gonna need any kind of yarn. I'm using 100% wool from Wool Ease Origins yarn. I believe Lion Brand stocks this. And then you'll need a 6mm hook, some scissors, measuring tape, darning needle, and a stitch marker. I usually use cotton yarns for my jockstraps, but since it's wintertime, I wanted to use wool just for something a bit warmer. So to make any size jockstrap, the pouch is actually going to be the same for all sizes. So that's what we're going to start with here. So you could go ahead and begin with a chain 17 to start. If you wanted to make it smaller or bigger, just start with any number you wanted. It doesn't matter, but then just follow the same pattern that I'm using throughout the whole entire thing. So I'm going to start with a chain 17. Okay, now once you have your chain 17, you're going to go ahead and skip that first chain that's next to the hook and then go into that second chain. And you're going to make a single crochet. And now you're going to continue making a single crochet into every chain until you get to the last one here. Okay, now once you get to your last stitch and you made a single crochet into every chain, you're going to go ahead and chain one. And now you're going to turn your work. And from this point on, we're going to be working into the back loops only. So you're going to see this V shape, and the back loop is the one right here, which is behind your hook. And then the front loop is the one that's in front of your hook. So we're going to go ahead and place one increase stitch into this first stitch. So go into that back loop and you're going to make a single crochet like you normally were. And then to increase, you're just going to make one more stitch into that same stitch you just made. So go back into that loop in the back loop only. And then you're going to place one more single crochet. And now you're going to continue making one single crochet until you get to the last stitch, and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, now when you get to the last stitch, you're going to chain one, turn your work, and then for the third row, we're going to do the same thing we just did and do an increase in the first stitch. So make one single crochet, and then make one more in that same stitch. Now you're going to continue making one single crochet into every stitch until you get to the end of the row, like we've been doing, and we're going to continue this pattern for 7 rows, or for a total of 7 rows. And once we get to the 7th row, I'll show you what to do next. Okay, now when you get up to the 7th row, you're going to do one more increase into the first stitch. And continue working down like normal, and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, once you get up to the 8th row, you're going to do what we've been doing, and you're going to chain one, and you're going to place an increase into the first stitch. But from this point on, we're going to stop increasing on the odd number rows and only increase on the even number rows. So this is row 8, and we're only going to increase on the even number rows until we get to row 12. So you're going to increase on the first stitch, and then for the odd number row, you're just going to work this row like normal. And then you're going to do that up until row 12. Okay, so for row 9, instead of increasing in the first stitch, you're just going to make one single crochet into the back loop and continue making one single crochet into every stitch in the back loop only until the end of the row. And you're going to do that for row 9 and row 11. And then for row 10 and row 12, you're going to increase on the first stitch. So do that until you get to row 12, and then I'll show you what's next. When you get up to row 13, we're just going to do what we did for row 9 and row 11. You're just going to work one normal row, so you're going to place a single crochet into the back loop of every stitch until you get to the end of the row. And you're going to do the same for row 14 as well. So go ahead and do row 13 and 14, no increasing or decreasing, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, now when you get to the end of row 14, you're going to chain 1 and turn your work. And now we're going to begin our decreasing, and the decreasing will only be on the odd side number rows. And you could always distinguish the rows. This tail end will be your even side, and the one without the tail end is your odd side. So to decrease, we're going to be still working into the back loops only, but you're going to go ahead and work a single crochet like you normally would by yarning over and pulling through that first loop. And instead of finishing it, you're going to go ahead into the next stitch over, start your single crochet like you normally would, yarn over and go through that first stitch. And then to finish the decrease, you're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. And that's how to decrease. And now we're going to continue working 1 single crochet into the back loop only of every stitch, and then I'll show you what to do next. And now for row 16, you're just going to work 1 normal row. So you're going to work a single crochet into the back loop of every stitch, chain 1, turn your work, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so for row 17, you're going to do a decrease in the first stitch, just like you did for the last row. So go into the back loop only of that first stitch, and then go into the next stitch over, yarn over, pull through that first loop, and then yarn over and pull through all 3. And now we're going to continue making 1 single crochet into the back loop only of every stitch, chain 1, and then turn. And then we're going to begin our double decrease, but I'll show you once you get there. Okay, so for row 18, you're going to work a single crochet into the back loop of every stitch, but you're going to leave the last 2 by themselves because that's where you're going to begin the decrease. So go ahead and work into every stitch and leave the last 2, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so when you have 2 stitches left in the 18th row, you're just going to decrease as you normally were by going into the back loop and pulling through 1 loop only, and then going into the next stitch and pulling through the first loop only, and then yarning over and pulling through all 3. Now you're going to continue doing this. You're going to chain 1, and then you're going to decrease on the first 2 stitches here as well. And you're going to continue doing a decrease into the first 2 stitches on the odd number row, and then the last 2 stitches of your even number rows. And you're going to do this until the 21st row. So go ahead until the 21st, decreasing at the beginning of any odd number row, and then decreasing at the end of any even number row. Okay, now once you get to the end of the 21st row, you can go ahead and cut your yarn. And you can fasten off by just chaining 1 and pulling all the way through. So at this point, we completed 1 part of the pouch. You're going to have to repeat these steps 1 more time to make the other side. So go ahead and rewind the video if you need to look at the steps again. But once you do that, you could set those 2 pouches aside, and I'll show you how to make the waistband and the side elastic. Okay, so in order to chain the waistband, you're going to have to measure your waist size. So you could either use some measuring tape and measure up to your waist size. So I'm actually making a large size for an order. So I'm gonna make a chain up into 36 inches. So for me, that was 150 chains. So go ahead and chain up to your desired length, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so to start the waistband, you're gonna go ahead and skip the first chain next to your hook and go into that second chain. And you're gonna yarn over and make 1 single crochet. And now you're going to continue going into every chain, and you're going to make 1 single crochet until you get to your last chain, and I'll show you what to do next. Now when you get to the end of the row, you're going to chain 1 and turn your work. And now we're going to be working a single crochet into every stitch in the row, but instead of going through the back loop like we did for the pouch, you're going to go through both loops, yarn over, and pull through 2. You're going to continue doing this into every stitch until the end of the row, and then you're going to chain 1 and turn your work like you just did, and you're going to continue doing this for a total of 6 rows. So you're going to continue this until you have 6 total rows, and then you can cut your yarn and fasten off like we did before, and that completes your waistband section. But if you want it to be thinner, then just do fewer rows than 6, or do more rows than 6 if you wanted it to be thicker. Go ahead and continue this for 6 more rows, and then cut your yarn and fasten off. And then you could set the waistband aside, and I'll show you how to make this side elastic. Okay, so when you finish the waistband, this is what it should look like before we sew it up together. And it's more on the thin side, so if you wanted to keep going and add some more rows, I wouldn't blame you. But you can set this aside, and I'll show you how to make the side elastic. All right, so to make the side elastic, you're gonna minus 10 from whatever you change for the waistband. So I chained 150. So for the side elastic, I'm gonna chain 140. Typically the side elastic is around the size of the waistband. So I like to just do 10 chains less so that there is a bit more grab there, because you don't want it being too loose, otherwise it won't fit around your butt. But we are going to add elastic in the end to the waistband and side elastic. So regardless, it's going to fit, but I would just recommend sizing down 10 chains. So go ahead and chain that, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, now when you chain your 140 or whatever chain you made that is 10 chains less than your waistband, you're now going to go ahead and skip that first chain that's next to the hook, go into that second chain there, and you're going to make a single crochet. So to make the side elastic, you're going to continue making a single crochet into every chain along the row. And once you get to your last one, you could go ahead and cut your yarn and fasten off. And that will complete your 4 pieces for the jockstrap. So you can go ahead and gather all your pieces, and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so at this point we have all of our pieces, and we're going to start with connecting the pouch pieces. So you can set aside the side elastic and the waistband. Now, the way I seam the pieces for the jockstrap are actually with a crochet hook, and I use slip stitch seaming. So you could use the 6mm hook that you've been using, but I do recommend getting a smaller hook. This is a 3.75. Honestly, anything smaller than like 5mm should be good. It just makes it so much easier when you're going through the actual work, since this is skinnier than the hook you use to work up the piece. So go ahead and grab your pouch pieces. They're both the same on each side. So unless you messed up on a certain side, it doesn't matter which sides are facing each other, but you should always have the right sides facing each other, because the outside is what you're going to end up seaming. So you're going to want to find the shorter side, and this is where we started our chain 17. So you can see the foundation chain row right here. And this is where we ended, since the tail ends are over here. And you can see that we have single crochet stitches along the edge, whereas on the foundation row, you can only really see that one chain. Once you have it in the right position with the shorter side on your right and then the longer side on your left, when I first started making jockstraps, I found it really helpful to stitch mark the last stitch in the row. So you're going to do that on both sides here, and you're going to see it because it's the last V shape in the row. And you're just going to stitch mark both sides together. So you're going to stitch mark the last stitch on this side and then the last stitch on the other pouch side. That way, when you're seaming around the edges here, you know where to stop and that it's even, because when you get up to this point, each stitch has to be correlating, so you know that you have the same amount on each side. So now to begin, you're going to find the last foundation chain in this beginning row, and you're going to find that on each side. You're going to put your hook through both of those stitches. Now you're going to grab your yarn and you're going to pull through, and you're going to chain 1 to secure. Now for extra security, I like to go back into that same stitch that I just made on both sides. And then I'll make one slip stitch by yarning over and pulling through both loops. It's a little tricky, but I would just try it. It definitely makes it extra secure. And then you could just pull that tail end of yarn a bit to make it even more secure. So all the ridges here symbolize 2 rows. So this is 2, 4, 6, 8. So in between these ridges are also a stitch. So make sure you're not missing those when you seam along the edges here. So we're going to start with this first stitch here, and then along to the next one in the middle, and then so on. So you're going to go through with your hook on both sides. Make sure that it's the same stitch on the other side. And you're going to yarn over and pull through both loops. Now you're going to keep going and you're going to find the next correlating stitch. So it's this one in the middle here. And then you're going to find the correlating stitch on the other side, yarn over and pull through all the loops. Now you're going to continue making a slip stitch into each correlating stitch until you reach your stitch marker, and then I'm going to show you what to do next. So if you did it right, you should have the same number of stitches on each side of the pouch. So to begin, you're going to get rid of the stitch marker. And we're going to begin by going into the first stitch here on the pouch side that's facing you. And you're going to go into the front loop only. And then on the other side of the pouch, you're actually going to go into the back loop only. And that gives it a nice clean finish in the seaming. And when you flip it over to the right side, when you're done seaming all the way through, it's going to blend in a little better than if you did all the loops together because it would have a harsher seaming line. So go ahead and yarn over and pull through all the loops on your hook. And now you're going to match up the next correlating 2 stitches and go through the front loop on the first one and then the back loop on the other side. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. Now you're going to keep doing this going through the front loop on the first side of the pouch and then the back loop on the correlating back side of the pouch. Yarn over and pull through all the loops. And you're going to do this into each correlating stitch until you reach the end here. And when you do reach the end, I'll show you how to connect the waistband. Okay, now once you get to the end here, you're going to set it aside and grab your waistband. And you're going to want to fold your waistband in half so that the edges that aren't together are lining up perfectly. And then you're going to find the other side that's folded. We'll be working on the last row that we finished off with. So it's going to be the side with the stitches that show the V rather than the foundation chain that only shows one single stitch here. So when you know you have it perfectly folded in half, make sure to find the stitch that is directly in the middle when you fold it in half. And that's where you're going to seam up the pouch and the waistband. So in order to save yarn, you're going to not cut your yarn from where you ended off seaming the pouch. And you're going to insert your hook into that middle stitch. And you're going to go through both of the loops. Now you're going to want to line it up as if the pouch is going along the waistband because that's how we're going to sew it up together. Insert it into that middle stitch. And then yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook to start attaching the pouch to the waistband. And now you're going to go into the next stitch on the pouch and you're going to find the back loop only of the waistband stitch because if you worked into the front, then it would leave more of a visible seam. Whereas if you work into the back loop, the front loop will be showing, so it has more of a clean design. So you're going to go into the back loop only, yarn over and pull through all the loops. And you're going to continue doing this into every stitch on the pouch up until the last 4 ridges. So you're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. And once you get up to this stitch here, you're going to cut your yarn and fasten off. So find that next stitch in the ridge and then find the next correlating stitch on the waistband side, only working into the back loop, yarn over and pull through all the loops. And now keep going, working into every stitch until you get to the fourth ridge. And once you get into that fourth ridge, you're going to work your last slip stitch and cut your yarn and fasten off. Okay, now when you cut your yarn and fasten off and you finish this off here, you're going to turn your work and you're going to reinsert your hook into that middle stitch right next to the one where you began. But now we're facing the opposite side. So you're going to go through both loops for extra security, and then you're going to go into the corresponding stitch on the other side, and we're going to grab our yarn and pull through. And then we're going to chain one to secure, and then slip stitch into that same stitch for extra security. And now we're going to begin doing what we did just on the other side of the pouch. So we're going to work into every stitch and the correlating stitch on the waistband until you get to the fourth ridge here, starting from the end, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a little bit different since we're working on the other side. So you're going to go into the front loop now that we're working with the waistband facing us first, rather than the pouch facing us. You could definitely do it the other way around by going into the fourth ridge first and then going down the line. But it's a bit harder because you're going to have to match up each stitch that's correlating. And if you miss a stitch, then it's going to be bunched up and you might just have to go back anyway and redo your work. So I recommend just doing it this way. But now you're just going to be working into the front loop of each stitch and then into both stitches of the pouch. So go ahead and continue making each slip stitch into the correlating stitches until you get to the fourth ridge, and then you're going to cut your yarn and fasten off, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so now we're going to connect the waistband together. So staying on the wrong side, you could see the seaming here, and if you want to go ahead and take a peek at what it's starting to look like, you could turn it inside out, and it should start to form that pouch shape. And when you wear it, these flaps actually hide inside. It's for extra comfort because when you do these seamed all the way, it gets really tight and it feels really uncomfortable. So remaining on the wrong side, you're going to flip over your waistband and you're going to make sure it's not tangled up like this. You're going to make sure that it's the right sides on the bottom facing each other. And then you're going to put your hook through on each correlating side. And if you made a long enough tail end, then you could definitely use this, which I'm going to try to use. But if not, then you could just grab your yarn like we did for seaming the other parts and just pull it through. So I'm going to go ahead and yarn over, pull through, and now I'm going to keep seaming in every correlating stitch until I get to the two tail ends here, which are the two last stitches. And then I'm going to fasten off the yarn, and then that should be good for connecting the waistband. I'm going to go into the next correlating stitch here, and then the same on the other side. Slip stitch through all three loops, and then continue doing this until I reach the last two stitches. And when you get to the last stitch, you can just fasten off your yarn. And when you flip it over, it should have a little bit of a seam line, but it should blend in. And that connects your waistband. And now all that's left is adding the side elastic. So make sure that your project is still turned out on the wrong side here. Find the middle right here of where the seaming ends at the bottom of the pouch. Now what you're going to do is similar to the waistband. You're going to fold the side elastic in half with the wrong side facing you and then the right side facing together. Just make sure that it's even on both sides. Now once you have it lined up and the right sides are together, you're going to put your hook directly through the first two correlating stitches on each side. And then you're going to also insert the hook into the middle seam here, but you're going to go right next to it instead of directly through it. And again, if you made a big enough tail end, you could use that, or you could just reattach yarn to seam this together. So you're going to yarn over, pull through, and then you're going to find the next stitches, which is the middle stitch, and go through both sides. And that's when you're going to go directly through that middle seam stitch. It might be a little tricky because it's seamed together, but with the smaller hook, it definitely makes it easier. So now you're going to yarn over and pull through all the loops. And now lastly, you're going to find that last correlating stitch here. And then you're going to go into the last stitch directly next to the middle seam there. Yarn over and pull through all the loops. Now you're going to fasten off your yarn. And that should connect the bottom of the side elastic. And now we have to connect it to the actual waistband as the last part. So you're going to find the wrong side that you've been working with and just make sure it's straight. You're going to count 10 stitches from where the pouch and the waistband meet up. So starting with this stitch right here, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And what we're going to do is put our hook through here. And what we're going to do is put our hook through that first stitch here. And I'm going to use the tail end since it's long enough here. And I'm going to yarn over and pull through. And then I'm going to chain one. And then I'm going to make a slip stitch into that same stitch for some extra security. And then go into the stitch right next to it through both loops. And then you're going to go into this last stitch on the side elastic. Make sure to go through both loops so you catch all the stitches there. And then you're going to yarn over and pull through. And if you flip it over, it should be seamless on the other side, and you know you did it right. We're going to do the same exact thing, but on the other side. So find the wrong side and make sure it's straight. And then since we're working on the right sides, and then since we're working on the right to left-hand side, we're going to find the 11th stitch on this side, and then work one stitch to the left into the 10th stitch as well to make sure it matches the other side. So go ahead and count and find the 11th stitch. You're going to do the same thing you did on the other side by seaming into the first stitch, insert your yarn, chain one, slip stitch into both of those stitches one more time, and then you're going to go into that stitch right next to it, and then go into the last stitch, yarn over, and slip stitch through both. And now you could cut your yarn if you attach your yarn, or you can just fasten off if you had a long enough tail end. Pull, and it should look the same as on the other side. So now once you finish that, your jockstrap is completely assembled. You could flip it on the other side. Now I would definitely recommend trying on the jockstrap just to make sure it's somewhat of a fit. It's definitely going to be much looser than you think because we're going to add elastic and then it will grab and hug your body the way that you want it to. So go ahead and weave in all these ends that you're seeing onto the wrong side of your work, and then come back and I'll show you how to add the elastic in. Okay, so when you're finished up weaving in your ends, it's time to add the elastic in. So I'm going to link the elastic that I'm using in the description, but I'm also using a 2mm hook. So start by turning your jockstrap inside out. And then once you have it turned inside out, we're going to begin at the back of the waistband. So you're going to want to insert your hook into any stitch right below the top row here. Definitely not this stitch here because then it'll show, but anything underneath that should be fine. It's a bit hard to see here, but I'm going to go into these stitches right here, these horizontal loops, and those are the stitches I'll work my elastic into. So you're going to grab your elastic yarn and you're going to pull it through, and then you're going to chain one, and then you're going to chain one, and just make sure to pull the tail end so that it's a bit tight there. And then you're going to go back into that same stitch and you're going to make a slip stitch, and that will make sure that it's really secured there. And now we're going to begin going across the whole entire jockstrap minus the pouch. So we're going to go ahead and find all these horizontal stitches that you see here, and we're going to skip each one. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this one and go into this one right here. And then I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to slip stitch through that first loop and then the second loop. Now I'm going to continue going around the whole entire waistband, skipping each horizontal stitch and working into the next one. So I'm going to skip this one right here, work into this next horizontal stitch. I'm going to yarn over and then pull through both loops. So now you're going to continue doing this all the way down until you reach this point right here, or your starting point. And then we're going to go back around and go the other way. So go ahead and get up to this point, and I will meet you there to show you how to go down and go back around. So depending on which side of the waistband you start on, I actually thought I started on the top here, but I started on the bottom half. So once you get to the point where you see your side elastic, we're actually going to go ahead and work down across onto the other side elastic and then back up onto the other side of the waistband. So if you are working on the bottom side and you get up to the side elastic here, you're just going to keep doing what you normally do and skip a stitch. But we're going to work into this first stitch here of the side elastic in order to get onto it. You're going to continue making slip stitches, skipping each horizontal stitch that you see. So I'm going to skip this one here and go into this first one right here. And I'm going to make a slip stitch. And then I'm going to continue going down, skipping each horizontal stitch and making one slip stitch until I get to the bottom, and then I'll show you how to transition onto the next side elastic. Okay, so when you get up to your last stitch here, all you're going to do is just insert your hook into the other side elastic, but make sure that the wrong side is facing you. So you could just go right into that first middle stitch there and slip stitch. And now continue going up until you get back to the waistband, skipping each horizontal line per stitch. So skip this first one and go into this loop here, yarn over and pull through. And now continue doing this until you get back to the waistband, and I'll show you how to finish. Okay, now when you reach the end here, you could just go right back onto the waistband. You could honestly go into any stitch, but I see the horizontal stitch right here. So I'm gonna put my hook into that, yarn over and slip stitch. And now what I'm gonna do is finish going around, skipping every horizontal stitch until I get back to my starting point. And it should be right here. And what you're gonna do is just slip stitch downward and back all the way around until you get to your starting point here. And then at that point, you'll be done with the elastic, and you could cut your yarn and fasten off and weave in all your ends, and that will complete the jockstrap. So I'm going to continue going around up until this point, and I'll just show you quickly how to turn around. Okay, now when you get up to this stitch here, right before the seaming, all you're going to do is turn your work. You're going to find any stitch, honestly, that gets you up into the other side, and you're going to yarn over and slip stitch. So the same process you've been doing, you're just turning your work now, and you're going to do, I'd say, about one more stitch. And then you could go ahead and slip stitch into the horizontal lines that you're usually working into when you're facing this way. So I'm going to go into this one right here. Turn over and slip stitch. Now you can turn your work back the way it was. And now you're going to continue doing what you're doing, skipping each horizontal line. And once you go all the way around back to your starting point here, you could go ahead and cut your yarn, and you can fasten off and weave in the two ends that you have here. And that should complete the jockstrap. Okay, so when you finish your jockstrap, it's gonna look a little bit scrunchy, but that's obviously because we added the elastic. But go ahead and try it on now, and it should fit like a glove. But that is all for the jockstrap.